The sharp crack of the pistol shot echoed through the night as Prudence Dawson fled barefoot across the open prairie, her white nightdress billowing behind her like a ghost in the moonlight. She could still feel the sting of Raymond's knuckles against her cheekbone, could still hear his drunken threats as she'd finally found the courage to do what she'd been planning for months: escape the prison her marriage had become. The year was 1875, and the western frontier of Colorado Territory offered little protection for women who fled their husbands, even ones as cruel as Raymond. But after 3 years of escalating abuse and a miscarriage caused by his latest beating, Prudence had decided death in the wilderness was preferable to another day under his roof. She ran until her lungs burned, until the soles of her feet were cut and bleeding from the rocky terrain. The lights of their small homestead had long since disappeared behind her, but she couldn't stop. Raymond would come after her, of that she was certain. He'd made it clear many times that she was his property, and Raymond Dawson did not let anyone steal what belonged to him. Dawn's first light found her collapsed beside a shallow creek, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Prudence splashed cold water on her face, the chill shocking her back to awareness. She had no food, no proper clothing, and no clear destination, only the desperate need to put as much distance between herself and Raymond as possible. She followed the creek, hoping it would lead to a town or settlement. Her once white nightdress was now stained with dirt and torn at the hem, her dark hair falling loose from its braid. She must look like a madwoman, perhaps she was. Madness seemed a small price for freedom. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly. Thirst clawed at her throat, hunger gnawed at her belly, and her feet left small bloodstains on the rocks. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Prudence spotted something in the distance: the unmistakable shape of cattle grazing on the hillside. Where there were cattle, there were people. With renewed determination, she pushed forward, wading through the creek to hide her tracks. Raymond was a skilled hunter. He'd taught her enough about tracking to know she needed to be clever if she wanted to stay free. The cattle lifted their heads as she approached, a few lowing softly in greeting. Beyond them, Prudence could make out a small cabin with smoke rising from its chimney. She hesitated at the edge of the property, suddenly aware of how she must appear wild-eyed, bloody-footed, and desperate. What if whoever lived there sent her back to Raymond? Or worse? Before she could decide whether to approach or retreat, the cabin door swung open. A tall man emerged, rifle in hand, scanning the perimeter before his gaze landed squarely on her. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the distance. Then Prudence's legs gave out beneath her, and darkness claimed her. When consciousness returned, she was lying on a straw-filled mattress inside the cabin. A rough woolen blanket covered her, and someone had tended to her feet, which were now wrapped in clean cloth. Panic seized her, and she bolted upright. "Easy there, miss," came a deep voice from across the room. "You're safe now." The man from outside sat in a wooden chair near the fireplace, his rifle propped against the wall beside him. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of the summer sky. A cowboy, judging by his attire and the calluses on his hands. "Who are you?" Prudence demanded, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. "Thomas Crawford," he replied, making no move to come closer. "This is my ranch, small as it is, found you about to collapse at the edge of my property." He paused, studying her with evident concern. "You running from something, miss?" Prudence swallowed hard. "Someone." He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed a suspicion. "Husband?" She flinched, which was answer enough. Thomas Crawford sighed, running a hand through his sandy hair. "I won't send you back if that's what you're worried about. No woman runs like that unless she's got good reason." Relief washed over her like a wave, bringing unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them back, unwilling to appear any weaker than she already did. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You got a name, Prudence." She hesitated before adding, "Prudence Dawson." "Well, Miss Prudence Dawson, you look like you haven't eaten in days." He stood and moved to the small stove in the corner. Nothing fancy, but it's hot. He ladled stew from a pot into a wooden bowl and brought it to her with a spoon and a chunk of bread. The simple kindness nearly undid her composure. "Why help me?" she asked, accepting the food with trembling hands. "You don't know me. I could be a criminal or a madwoman." A faint smile touched his lips. "Could be, but you don't look like either to me." His expression grew serious. "Been out here long enough to know good folks from bad, and I know what desperation looks like." Prudence ate slowly, savoring each bite of the simple but hearty stew. As her hunger abated, exhaustion returned, making her eyelids heavy. "You'll be safe here tonight," Thomas said, noticing her fatigue. "I'll sleep in the barn. Tomorrow we can figure what's next." "He'll come looking," she warned. "My husband, he's dangerous." Thomas nodded, his jaw tightening. "Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." When Prudence awoke next, sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was, expecting Raymond's angry face looming over her. The realization that she was free at least for now sent relief coursing through her veins. She sat up gingerly, her body aching from her desperate flight. Her feet stung when she placed them on the floor, but someone Thomas had cleaned and bandaged them properly. On a chair beside the bed lay a folded shirt and pair of trousers, clearly men's clothing but better than her filthy nightdress. After changing, she made her way outside, squinting in the bright morning light. Thomas was by the corral, working with a chestnut mare. He looked up as she approached, offering a nod of greeting. "Morning. There's coffee in the pot if you want some." "Thank you." Prudence hovered uncertainly. "For everything, I don't know what would have happened if no need for that," he interrupted, gentle but firm. Anyone would have done the same. She knew that wasn't true. Plenty would have turned her away or worse, sent word to Raymond. "I should move on," she said, though the thought filled her with dread. "I've imposed enough, and if my husband tracks me here." Thomas secured the mare in the corral before turning to face her fully. "Where would you go?" The question hung between them, exposing the reality of her situation. Prudence had no money, no family to turn to, no friends who wouldn't immediately inform Raymond of her whereabouts. Her shoulders slumped. "I don't know." Thomas studied her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "My sister left some clothes behind last time she visited. They might fit you better than those." He gestured to the oversized garments she wore. "And I could use some help around here." "Cooking, mending, whatever you can manage." Hope fluttered in her chest. "You'd let me stay for as long as you need." His eyes, direct and honest, met hers. "You escaped a life you couldn't endure. You'll start a new one here if you want." The simplicity of his offer nearly brought her to tears. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Something flickered across his face, an old pain quickly masked. "Let's just say I understand what it means to need a fresh start." He turned back to his work. "Decision's yours." "But you're welcome here." Prudence watched him with the mare, the gentle way he handled the animal despite his obvious strength. In 3 years of marriage, she'd never known a man's touch to be anything but painful. The contrast stirred something inside her, not attraction, not yet, but a cautious wonder. "I accept," she said finally. "But I insist on earning my keep. I'm a hard worker, Mr. Crawford." "Thomas," he corrected. "And I never doubted it for a minute." The days that followed fell into a pattern that brought Prudence an unexpected peace. She rose early to prepare breakfast before Thomas went out to work the cattle. The small ranch, barely 50 head on a modest parcel of land, required constant attention, and she found satisfaction in contributing to its upkeep. Thomas's sister's clothes fit well enough, though Prudence had to take in the waist and hem the skirts. She discovered a vegetable garden behind the cabin, overgrown but salvageable, and spent hours weeding and tending the neglected plants. At night, Thomas slept in the barn despite her protests that she would take the simpler accommodation. "A lady doesn't sleep in a barn," was all he would say on the matter, in a tone that brooked no argument. They spoke little of her past, though occasionally Thomas would ask careful questions: how long she'd been married, where she'd come from originally. She learned he had been ranching alone for 3 years since his father passed. His sister Margaret was married to a storekeeper in Denver. No wife, Prudence ventured one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Thomas's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Was engaged once. She died, mountain fever. I'm sorry, he nodded, accepting her sympathy without elaboration. Prudence understood his reticence. Some wounds were too deep for casual conversation. A week passed, then 2. Her feet healed, and her body grew stronger from the fresh air and good food. Sometimes, she caught Thomas watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Not lecherous like Raymond's, but something warmer, almost protective. It was during the 3rd week that the tranquility of their arrangement was shattered. Prudence was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Instinctively, she ducked behind the cabin, heart pounding. 2 riders came into view, strangers, not Raymond, but men nonetheless. They dismounted near the corral where Thomas was mending a fence. "Afternoon," one called. "Hope you don't mind us stopping by, looking for a woman passed through here maybe." Prudence pressed herself against the cabin wall, straining to hear. "Haven't seen any women out this way in months," Thomas replied, his voice casual. "My sister visits occasionally, but that's all." "This one would have been on foot," the second man said. "Young, dark-haired, probably looking pretty rough. Husband's offering a reward, says she's not right in the head, ran off in the night." "Sorry to hear that," Thomas said, "but can't help you, been working sunup to sundown without much company." There was a pause, and Prudence held her breath. "Mind if we water our horses before moving on?" "Help yourselves to the trough." As the men led their horses to water, one remarked, "Funny, that laundry on your line looks mighty small for a man your size." Prudence's blood froze. "My sister," Thomas answered smoothly. "Left some things last visit. Thought I'd clean them up for when she returns." The men lingered longer than necessary, asking questions about neighboring properties and whether Thomas had seen any other travelers. Eventually, they remounted and rode off, but not before one called back. "If you do see her, Dawson's offering $50. Just send word to Cedar Ridge." Only when the sound of hoofbeats had completely faded did Prudence emerge from her hiding place, trembling. Thomas met her halfway across the yard, his expression grim. "Raymond Dawson, your husband?" She nodded mutely. "He's got men searching for you, telling folks you're not right in the head." "Of course he is," she whispered bitterly. "Easier than admitting the truth." Thomas's jaw tightened. "We should be prepared. They might come back, or others might come. Word spreads fast out here." That night Prudence couldn't sleep. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle outside sent her heart racing. Would Raymond find her? What would he do when he did? The questions circled like vultures in her mind. Near dawn, she gave up on rest and slipped outside. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, the air crisp with autumn's approach. She wrapped her shawl tighter and walked to the corral where the chestnut mare watched her approach. "You're up early." Thomas's voice startled her. He emerged from the barn, already dressed for the day's work. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. He joined her at the fence, offering the mare a gentle pat. "Thinking about yesterday's visitors?" "Yes," she hesitated. "Thomas, I should leave." "I'm putting you in danger by staying." "And where would you go?" he asked, the same question as before, but now with more weight behind it. "I don't know," she confessed, "but Raymond won't stop looking, and when he finds me—" She couldn't finish the thought. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "My father used to say that running only gets you so far. Sometimes you have to stand and face what's coming." Fear clutched at her heart. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "I think I do." His voice was gentle but firm. "Men like that, they only know how to take, how to control." "I've met my share." "Then you know why I can't stay. He'll hurt you to get to me." Thomas turned to face her fully, his expression resolute in the growing light. "Miss Prudence, I'm not asking you to leave, and I'm not afraid of your husband. This is your decision to make, but know that if you stay, I'll protect you, with my life if necessary." The promise hung between them, unexpected and profound. Prudence searched his face, looking for the lies or manipulations she'd grown accustomed to with Raymond. She found only sincerity. Why? She whispered, "Why would you risk so much for me?" Thomas's gaze softened. "Because everyone deserves a chance at peace, at happiness." His hand moved as if to touch her, then fell back to his side. "And because in these few weeks I've come to—" He cleared his throat. "I've come to value your company." Something warm unfurled in Prudence's chest, a feeling so long absent she barely recognized it. Hope. "If I stay," she said carefully, "we need to be prepared. Raymond won't give up easily. He's possessive." Thomas nodded. "Then we'll be ready." The days that followed were tense with anticipation. Thomas taught Prudence how to use his spare revolver just in case, he insisted, though she prayed she'd never need to fire it. They established signals and hiding places should strangers appear. Despite the undercurrent of fear, their daily routines continued. The work of the ranch didn't pause for human troubles, and Prudence found solace in the rhythm of chores. Each sunset that passed without Raymond's appearance allowed her to breathe a little easier, to smile a little more freely. And somewhere amid the worry and waiting, something else was growing between them. Prudence noticed it in the way Thomas's gaze lingered when he thought she wasn't looking. She felt it in herself, the flutter in her stomach when their hands accidentally touched, the way she found herself smoothing her hair before he came in for meals. It terrified her, this fragile new feeling. Raymond had taught her that a man's attention was dangerous, that love was just another word for ownership. But Thomas was different in every way, patient, respectful, kind. One evening, as autumn painted the aspen trees golden, Thomas returned from town with supplies and a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, almost shyly placing it in her hands. Prudence unwrapped it carefully to reveal a book of poetry, Tennyson, well-worn but clearly cherished. "It was my mother's," Thomas explained. "You mentioned you liked to read, and I thought, well, the evenings are getting longer." The simple thoughtfulness of the gift brought tears to her eyes. "Thomas, I can't accept this. It's a family heirloom. I want you to have it." His voice was quiet but certain. "It should be enjoyed, not sitting on a shelf gathering dust." Their fingers brushed as she accepted the book, and neither pulled away. For a heartbeat, they stood connected by this small point of contact, something unspoken passing between them. The moment broke when Prudence stepped back, clutching the book to her chest. "Thank you, I'll treasure it." That night, she read by lamplight until her eyes grew heavy, finding comfort in the familiar rhythms of poetry. She fell asleep with the book beside her, dreaming not of Raymond's fury but of Thomas's gentle smile. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Prudence rose early to stoke the fire and prepare breakfast. As she kneaded dough for biscuits, she found herself humming softly a tune her mother had sung during her childhood in Ohio, before illness took her, leaving Prudence alone at 16. That loneliness had driven her into Raymond's arms at 19. He'd seemed so charming then, so protective and strong. She'd mistaken his possessiveness for devotion, his jealousy for love. By the time she recognized the truth, she was trapped in a marriage that had become a prison. Now, at 23, she was finding her voice again, remembering the girl she'd been before Raymond crushed her spirit. The realization brought both joy and sadness, joy for her growing strength, sadness for the years lost. The door opened, bringing a gust of cold air as Thomas entered, arms laden with firewood. "Morning," he greeted, stomping snow from his boots. "Winter's coming early this year." Prudence smiled, sliding the biscuits into the oven. "Breakfast will be ready soon." Thomas stacked the wood neatly by the fireplace, then washed his hands in the basin. As they sat down to eat, he cleared his throat nervously. "Been thinking," he began, not quite meeting her eyes. "Winter's hard out here, harder alone." Prudence waited, sensing something important in his hesitant words. "What I mean to say is..." He took a breath. "I know it hasn't been long and your situation is complicated, but I've grown fond of you, Prudence, more than fond." Her heart quickened. "Thomas, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted quickly. I understand if it's too soon or if you don't feel the same. I just wanted you to know that whatever happens with your husband, you have a place here, for as long as you want it. The sincerity in his blue eyes nearly undid her. No man had ever looked at her that way, as if she were precious, but not a possession. Before she could respond, a sound outside caught their attention: hoofbeats, multiple horses, approaching fast. Thomas was on his feet instantly, reaching for his rifle. Get to the root cellar, he ordered, all tenderness gone from his voice, replaced by steely resolve. Thomas, go, Prudence. Now. She hesitated only briefly before lifting the trapdoor hidden beneath the rug and descending into the small storage space below. Thomas closed it above her, leaving her in darkness save for thin slivers of light between the floorboards. Through these, she watched Thomas position himself by the window, rifle ready. The hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped. Men's voices carried through the chill air, 3, maybe 4 of them. Crawford, a voice called, we know you're in there, got some questions for you. Thomas moved to the door, opening it just enough to reply, state your business. Raymond Dawson sends his regards, says you've got something that belongs to him. Prudence's blood ran cold. Raymond hadn't come himself too cowardly to face Thomas directly, but he'd sent men to do his dirty work. Don't know what you're talking about, Thomas answered evenly. Sure you do. The voice grew harder. Dark-haired woman answers to Prudence, Dawson's wife. Been seen in these parts, and word is she's staying with you. Whoever told you that was mistaken. A different voice spoke up. Why don't you invite us in for coffee, Crawford? Just want to look around. Make sure you're not harboring another man's wife. Wouldn't want to accuse you falsely. My hospitality doesn't extend to strangers making demands, Thomas replied. You've got your answer. Time for you to move on. A tense silence followed, broken by the sound of a rifle being cocked. Don't be stupid, Crawford. It's 4 against 1. All we want is the woman. And all I'm saying is she's not here. Thomas's voice remained steady. Now get off my property before this gets ugly. One of the men laughed. Already ugly friend, Dawson's offering $100 now, dead or alive, he didn't specify, mighty tempting. Prudence pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle a gasp. Raymond wanted her dead. The realization shouldn't have shocked her, but it did. Somewhere in her heart, she'd believed he wanted her back because of some twisted version of love. But this wasn't love, it was pride, possession, the rage of a man whose property had dared to escape. Above her, she could see Thomas's boots planted firmly, his stance unwavering. Last warning, leave now. The sharp crack of a gunshot shattered the morning stillness. Prudence bit back a scream as splinters flew from the doorframe near Thomas's head. He ducked back inside, slamming the door. Get down, he shouted, though she was already below floor level. More shots followed, peppering the cabin walls. Thomas returned fire through the window, his movements controlled despite the chaos. Prudence huddled in the cellar, praying for his safety, cursing herself for bringing this danger to his door. The gunfire paused. Send her out, Crawford, and we'll let you live, one of the men called. Not happening, Thomas yelled back, repositioning to another window. The shooting resumed with increased ferocity. Through the floorboards, Prudence could see Thomas moving strategically around the cabin, firing judiciously, clearly conserving ammunition. A bullet shattered the window above the stove, sending glass cascading across her freshly baked biscuits. Then came a sound that turned her blood to ice, the distinct whoosh of flames catching. One of the men had lit a torch. Burn him out, someone shouted. Thomas cursed, firing rapidly at the approaching threat. Prudence heard a cry of pain. He'd hit one of them, but the damage was done. The outer wall of the cabin had caught fire. Smoke began to seep through the floorboards. The trapdoor suddenly flew open, and Thomas's face appeared above her. We have to go, he said urgently. Out the back through the root cellar exit. They don't know it's there. He helped her up, then grabbed a canvas bag that he'd apparently prepared for just such an emergency. It contained ammunition, food, and what looked like important papers. Stay low, he instructed, guiding her toward the small door at the back of the root cellar that opened to the outside. The smokehouse is 30 paces straight ahead. Get there and wait. I'll be right behind you. Thomas, go now. He gave her a gentle push toward the exit. Heart pounding, Prudence crawled through the small opening and emerged behind the cabin. Smoke billowed from the roof now, flames licking up the wooden walls. The men's attention was focused on the front, waiting for them to flee the burning structure. She ran, crouched low, to the stone smokehouse, slipping inside its dark interior. Seconds stretched into minutes as she waited, terrified Thomas wouldn't make it. The sound of more gunshots sent her heart into her throat. Just as she was about to risk going back for him, the smokehouse door opened. Thomas stumbled in, blood staining his left sleeve. "You're hurt," she gasped. "Grazed me, that's all," he grimmed, though pain tightened the corners of his eyes. "We need to keep moving." "I got 2 of them, but the others will circle around soon." "You're home," Prudence whispered, anguished. "All because of me." Thomas shook his head firmly. "Buildings can be rebuilt, you can't be replaced." He peered outside. "My horse is in the far pasture. If we can reach her, we might outrun them." They slipped out the back of the smokehouse and made their way through the underbrush toward the pasture. Behind them, the cabin was fully engulfed now, smoke rising in a thick column against the blue sky. The chestnut mare was grazing peacefully, unaware of the drama unfolding. Thomas whistled softly and she lifted her head, trotting toward them. "No saddle," he muttered, helping Prudence onto the horse's back before swinging up behind her. "Hold tight." They took off across the open pasture toward the tree line where the forest would provide cover. Prudence could hear shouts behind them. They'd been spotted. Thomas urged the mare faster, one arm around Prudence's waist, the other holding the reins. She could feel his warmth against her back, his heart pounding in time with hers. Despite everything, despite the danger and loss, she felt strangely exhilarated, free, truly free for the first time in years. The forest enveloped them, branches whipping past as Thomas navigated through the dense underbrush. He seemed to know these woods intimately, following paths invisible to her eye. "There's a trapper's cabin about 5 miles north," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "Old friend of my father's. We'll be safe there until we figure our next move." Prudence nodded, not trusting her voice. Her emotions were too raw. Too conflicted, guilt for the destruction of Thomas's home warring with gratitude for his protection. Fear of Raymond's relentless pursuit mingling with a growing, undeniable attraction to the man whose arms now held her secure. They rode hard for nearly an hour, the mare tiring but gamely pressing on. Eventually, Thomas slowed their pace, listening intently for any sign of pursuit. "I think we lost them," he said finally. "For now, at least." The trapper's cabin appeared as the sun began its westward descent, a small, sturdy structure nestled among tall pines. It looked abandoned, with cobwebs in the windows and the door secured by a rusted padlock. Thomas retrieved a key from beneath a large stone near the entrance. "Ezra always kept it here in case of emergency," he explained. "Hasn't used this place in years, but it should still be sound." Inside, the cabin was dusty but intact, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table and chairs, and a narrow bed pushed against one wall. Thomas quickly checked the perimeter before allowing Prudence to enter. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it'll keep us sheltered tonight." "It's perfect," she replied sincerely. In truth, it could have been a palace or a hovel. The important thing was that they were alive and together. While Thomas tended to the horse, securing her in a small lean-to behind the cabin, Prudence set about making the space habitable. She swept away cobwebs, found old candles in a cupboard, and discovered a cache of preserved food, jerky, dried beans, and coffee stored in tightly sealed jars. By the time Thomas returned, she had a small fire going in the fireplace and water heating for coffee. "You're bleeding again," she noted with concern, seeing the fresh stain on his sleeve. "It's nothing. Let me see." Her tone brooked no argument. Reluctantly, he sat at the table while she examined the wound. The bullet had indeed only grazed him, but the cut was deep enough to need attention. She found a flask of whiskey in Thomas's emergency bag and used it to clean the wound, apologizing for the sting. "Had worse," he assured her, though his jaw tightened as she worked. Using strips torn from a clean shirt, she bandaged his arm carefully. Her fingers lingered longer than necessary, the simple act of caring for him creating an intimacy that made her heart race. "Thank you," he said softly when she finished, "for everything, Prudence, not just this." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. She was suddenly acutely aware of how close they were, how alone in this small cabin miles from anywhere. Thomas cleared his throat and stood, breaking the moment. "We should eat something, been a long day." They shared a simple meal of jerky and beans, the conversation sparse but comfortable. As night fell and the temperature dropped, the single bed became an obvious concern. "I'll take the floor," Thomas said immediately, anticipating her worry. "Don't be ridiculous," Prudence replied. "You're injured and it's cold. The bed's small but adequate for both of us." Her cheeks flushed at her own boldness, but she continued, "I trust you, Thomas. More than I've ever trusted anyone." Something flashed in his eyes, gratitude, perhaps, or deeper emotion. He nodded slowly. "If you're sure." They lay down fully clothed, a respectable few inches between them. Prudence stared at the log ceiling, listening to Thomas's steady breathing beside her, acutely aware of his presence. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. "About your ranch, your home. Don't be." His voice was low, intimate in the small space. "It was just a place. What matters is that you're safe." "Why?" The question had been burning inside her for weeks. "Why am I so important to you?" Thomas was silent for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he shifted to face her, though in the dim firelight she could barely make out his features. "When I lost Elizabeth, my fiancée, I thought I'd never feel anything again, just went through the motions day after day." His voice was rough with emotion. "Then you appeared, half dead on my property, and something woke up inside me, your courage, your determination. You reminded me that life goes on, that hearts can heal." Prudence felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not brave," she whispered. "I ran away." "No," he corrected gently. "You survived, there's a difference." His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "Some people endure their whole lives, never finding the courage to seek something better. You did." The simple validation of her choice, her escape, unleashed something in Prudence. Tears flowed freely now, years of pain and fear finding release in Thomas's understanding. "I was so afraid," she confessed. "Every day with him I died a little more, and even now I'm afraid he'll find me, find us." Thomas's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "We'll face that together if it comes, but Prudence," he hesitated, "I need you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever you decide about us, about your future, it's your choice. Always. I'm not offering protection in exchange for anything." The implication was clear, and it moved her deeply. Raymond had always treated her body as his right, her obedience as his due. Thomas was offering freedom not just from Raymond, but from all expectations. "I know," she whispered. Impulsively, she leaned forward in the darkness and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief, chaste, but it sent warmth cascading through her entire body. When she pulled back, Thomas remained perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. "Prudence," he breathed her name like a prayer. "That was my choice," she said softly, "and I'd make it again." This time when their lips met, the kiss deepened. His hand cupped her face with exquisite tenderness, as if she were made of spun glass. Prudence melted into him, discovering for the first time the sweet pleasure that could exist between a man and woman when both came together as equals. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "We should sleep," he murmured, though reluctance colored his tone. "Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." They settled back down, closer now, her head resting on his uninjured shoulder, his arm wrapped protectively around her. Prudence fell asleep listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in years. Morning brought clarity and purpose. Over a breakfast of coffee and the last of the biscuits Prudence had managed to grab before fleeing the cabin, they discussed their options. "Raymond won't stop looking," she said, facing the reality squarely. "Not now, especially after his men were killed." Thomas nodded grimly. "We have three choices as I see it. We can keep running head further west, maybe California. We can go to the authorities, though the law doesn't always side with wives against husbands. And the third option," Prudence asked, noting his hesitation, "we end this. Confront Raymond directly." The thought sent ice through her veins. "He'd kill you, kill us both." "Maybe," Thomas acknowledged, "but running means always looking over our shoulders, and I'm not sure you'd ever truly feel free." He was right, though the prospect terrified her. Raymond would forever be a shadow across her life unless something changed fundamentally. "How would we even find him?" she asked. "Cedar Ridge, according to those men. It's a day's ride from here." Thomas's expression was solemn. "But Prudence, this has to be your decision." "I won't push you into danger." She considered her options carefully. Running appealed to her instinct for survival, but Thomas was right, she would never be truly free while Raymond lived and searched for her. Going to the authorities seemed futile. A woman's word against her husband's rarely carried weight, especially when that husband had money and influence, as Raymond did. "We confront him," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "But on our terms, not his." Thomas's eyes reflected both pride and concern. "You're sure?" "No," she admitted with a small, shaky laugh. "I'm terrified, but I'm more afraid of spending my life in fear." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we do this together, but we'll need a plan." "Raymond sounds like a man who's used to getting his way through force." "He is," Prudence confirmed, "but he has one weakness, his pride. He cares deeply what others think of him." Thomas considered this. "Then perhaps we use that, make this public. Make him face not just us, but the judgment of others." They spent the morning outlining a strategy. It was risky, dependent on timing and Raymond's predictable nature, but it offered their best chance. By midday, they had prepared as much as possible. "We should rest," Thomas suggested. "We'll leave at first light tomorrow." The hours passed in quiet conversation as they learned more about each other, filling in the gaps of their hastily formed bond. Thomas told her about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams of expanding it someday. Prudence shared memories of her childhood in Ohio, of the poetry she'd loved before Raymond forbade her such frivolous pursuits. As evening approached, the tension of what awaited them tomorrow hung in the air. Thomas built up the fire while Prudence prepared a simple stew from their limited provisions. "There's something I need to ask you," Thomas said as they ate. "Something important." Prudence looked up, her heart quickening. "Yes." "If tomorrow goes as planned, if we succeed, and you're truly free, what do you want? For your future, I mean." The question caught her off guard. For so long, she'd focused only on escape, on survival. The concept of wanting, of choosing a future for herself, felt foreign yet exhilarating. "I'm not sure," she answered honestly. "I've spent 3 years being told what to want, what to think. It might take time for me to find my own desires again." Thomas nodded, understanding. "Of course, He hesitated. "I want you to know that whatever you choose, I'll support it. Even if it doesn't include me." The vulnerability in his expression made her heart ache. She reached across the table and took his hand. "Thomas Crawford," she said softly, "in the short time I've known you, you've shown me more kindness, more respect than I've known in years. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know that if I have a future worth living, I want you in it." The hope that bloomed across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then we have even more reason to succeed tomorrow," he murmured. That night they held each other close, finding comfort in simple touch as they faced the uncertainty ahead. Prudence slept fitfully, her dreams haunted by Raymond's rage, but each time she woke, Thomas was there, solid and reassuring beside her. Dawn broke clear and cold. They prepared in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Thomas cleaned his revolver methodically while Prudence changed into the cleanest clothes available. She wanted to face Raymond looking strong, not beaten. Before mounting the mare, Thomas pulled Prudence into a fierce embrace. "Whatever happens today," he whispered against her hair, "know that meeting you has been the greatest gift of my life." She clung to him, drawing strength from his solidity. "And you, mine, let's finish this so we can begin something better." The ride to Cedar Ridge took most of the day, their progress slowed by the need for caution. They approached the town as dusk gathered, the perfect time for their plan. Cedar Ridge was larger than Prudence had expected, a proper town with a main street, hotel, several saloons, and even a small church. At this hour, the saloons were doing brisk business, their windows glowing invitingly in the gathering darkness. "The Golden Spur," Thomas murmured, indicating the largest establishment. "That's where men like Raymond would drink." They left the horse at the livery stable and made their way toward the saloon. Prudence pulled her borrowed shawl tighter around her shoulders, heart pounding. She was about to publicly confront the man who had terrorized her for years. The thought nearly paralyzed her. Thomas seemed to sense her fear. He stopped in the shadow of a building, turning to face her. "We don't have to do this," he said quietly. "We can still ride out, head west. Start fresh somewhere he'd never find us." For a moment, the temptation was overwhelming, but Prudence knew running would mean Raymond would always have power over her, even from a distance. "No," she said firmly. "I need to face him, to end this properly." Thomas studied her face, then nodded. "I'll be right beside you, every step." They approached the Golden Spur together. Through the windows, Prudence could see it was crowded, perfect for their purpose. More witnesses meant more protection. Thomas squeezed her hand. "Ready," she took a deep breath. "Ready." They pushed through the batwing doors into the warm, noisy interior. Conversations continued unabated, few patrons bothering to look up at the newcomers. Prudence scanned the room, her heart stuttering when she spotted a familiar figure at a corner table, Raymond. He looked as she remembered, handsome in a hard way, his dark hair slicked back, expensive clothes setting him apart from the working men around him. He was playing cards, a whiskey at his elbow, laughing at something one of his companions said. "That's him," she whispered to Thomas. "Corner table." Thomas's expression darkened as he assessed the man who had caused Prudence so much pain. "Stay close to me," he murmured. They made their way through the crowded room. Prudence could feel her legs trembling beneath her skirts, but she forced herself forward. This was her moment to reclaim her life. They were halfway to Raymond's table when he looked up and saw her. The recognition that flashed across his face was quickly replaced by cold fury. "Well," he drawled, loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "Look what we have here." My wayward wife returned at last. The saloon grew quieter as patrons sensed drama unfolding. Raymond stood slowly, his gaze shifting between Prudence and Thomas. "And who's this?" he asked with dangerous softness. "The man who's been harboring my property." Prudence felt Thomas tense beside her, but she squeezed his arm in warning. This was her fight. "I am not your property, Raymond," she said, her voice stronger than she'd expected. "I never was." Raymond's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now, Prudence, you know that's not true." "Till death do us part, remember? Those were your vows before God and witnesses." "Vows you broke the first time you raised your hand to me," she countered. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Domestic disputes were private matters in most communities, but public accusations changed things. Raymond's expression hardened. "You always did have an active imagination. Perhaps we should discuss this privately." He took a step toward her. Thomas moved slightly in front of her. "The lady's not going anywhere with you." Raymond assessed Thomas coolly. "This doesn't concern you, stranger." "It does when you send men to burn down my home and try to kill us both," Thomas replied evenly. Another murmur, louder this time. Raymond's gaze darted around, noting the increased attention. "I don't know what she's told you," he said, his voice lowered, "but my wife is unwell. Prone to delusions. I've been searching for her out of concern for her health." "I'm not unwell," Prudence stated clearly. I fled because I feared for my life because of this." She pushed back her sleeve to reveal a faded but still visible scar on her forearm where Raymond had pressed a cigar during one of his rages. Several women in the crowd gasped. One of the card players at Raymond's table shifted uncomfortably. "Accidents happen," Raymond dismissed, though his eyes had grown calculating. "Prudence, you're embarrassing yourself. Come home and we'll forget this episode. I'm not going anywhere with you," she declared. "Not now, not ever. I want a divorce." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Divorce was rare, scandalous but not unheard of in the Western territories, especially in cases of abuse. Raymond's facade cracked, rage bleeding through. "You ungrateful whore," he hissed, lunging forward. Thomas moved swiftly, intercepting him with a solid punch that sent Raymond staggering back into his table, cards and whiskey flying. The saloon erupted. Men jumped to their feet, some backing away from the confrontation, others moving closer for a better view. The barkeeper shouted for order. Raymond recovered quickly, drawing a small pistol from his coat pocket. "I'll kill you both," he snarled. Before he could aim, a large man, the town marshal, judging by his badge, stepped forward and clamped a hand on Raymond's wrist. "That's enough," he said firmly. "No shooting in my town." Raymond struggled briefly before recognizing the authority of the badge. His expression smoothed, charm replacing rage with practiced ease. "Marshal, this man has stolen my wife. I'm simply defending what's mine by law." The marshal, a weathered man in his 50s, looked between them. "That true, madam? You this man's wife?" Prudence straightened her spine. "By law, yes, but I left him because he beat me regularly, because her voice caught, because he caused me to lose our child with his fists." A stunned silence fell over the room. Even in the rough frontier, some lines weren't crossed. Violence against women might be overlooked, but causing the death of an unborn child was another matter entirely. The marshal's expression hardened as he turned back to Raymond. "That true?" "Of course not," Raymond scoffed. "She's lying. Probably lost the baby because she was carrying on with him." He jerked his head toward Thomas. "I never met Miss Prudence until 3 weeks ago," Thomas stated clearly. "When she appeared on my property, half dead from running barefoot across the prairie to escape this man." An older woman pushed forward from the crowd. "I believe her," she announced. To Prudence's surprise, she recognized one of the saloon girls from Cedar Ridge, a woman she'd seen but never spoken to during the few times Raymond had brought her to town. "Mr. Dawson here's been boasting for years about how he keeps his woman in line," the woman continued. "Bragging about it while drinking, we all heard it." Another voice joined in, a shopkeeper Prudence recognized. "It's true, Dawson's got a temper. Seen him rough up folks over business deals gone sour." Raymond's charm was failing him now as more voices joined the chorus, people sharing their own observations of his character. The marshal maintained his grip on Raymond's wrist. "Seems there's quite a few folks willing to speak against you, Dawson." "They're lying," Raymond spat. "All of them. She's my wife and I have the right. You have the right to treat her with respect," the marshal interrupted. "Anything less isn't right by God or man, legal papers or no." A gray-haired woman stepped forward, the preacher's wife, Prudence realized. "The church can offer shelter," she said directly to Prudence, "while this is sorted out legally." Raymond's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. She's my wife." "Not for much longer," Prudence replied steadily. "I'm filing for divorce on grounds of cruelty." The marshal nodded grimly. "In the meantime, Dawson, you'll be spending the night in my jail. Those men you sent to burn down property and murder folks, that's serious business." "You can't prove I sent anyone," Raymond snarled. "Maybe not," the marshal conceded. "But I can hold you while I investigate, and I can make sure you stay away from this lady until a judge hears her petition." As 2 deputies came forward to take Raymond away, he fixed Prudence with a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," he promised. "Yes," she replied calmly, "it is." Only when Raymond had been escorted from the saloon did Prudence's composure crack. Her legs weakened, and she might have fallen if Thomas hadn't steadied her with a supportive arm. "You did it," he murmured, pride evident in his voice. "We did it," she corrected, leaning into his strength. The preacher's wife approached them. "You're welcome at our home tonight, both of you, and tomorrow I'll help you draft that petition for divorce. My husband has some legal training." Gratitude overwhelmed Prudence. "Thank you. I can't repay such kindness." The woman patted her hand. "No need. Just seeing a woman stand up for herself is payment enough. Too few do." As they followed the woman from the saloon, Prudence felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she could breathe freely, without fear shadowing every moment. Thomas walked beside her, close but not touching, respectful of appearances in this new place. But his eyes, when they met hers, contained promises that made her heart soar. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The territorial judge happened to be circuit riding through Cedar Ridge that very week, a stroke of fortune Prudence could scarcely believe. With testimony from multiple witnesses to Raymond's character and the visible evidence of Prudence's scars, the judge granted her petition for divorce with surprising speed. Raymond, facing charges related to the attack on Thomas's ranch, had no choice but to accept the ruling. The last Prudence saw of him was his back as he boarded an eastbound stage, his empire crumbling as business associates distanced themselves from the scandal. 3 weeks after confronting Raymond in the saloon, Prudence stood at the edge of what had been Thomas's ranch. The cabin was gone, but the land remained beautiful, resilient, full of possibility. "It'll take time to rebuild," Thomas said, standing beside her. "But the foundation's solid. We can make it stronger than before." Prudence turned to him, struck by the meaning behind his words. "We." Thomas took her hand, his expression serious but hopeful. "I know it might seem fast. You've only just gained your freedom, and the last thing I want is to rush you into another commitment." "But," she prompted, her heart quickening, "but I love you, Prudence." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. "I love your courage, your kindness, your strength, and if you'll have me, I'd like to build a life with you, here or elsewhere, wherever you want to go." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow but overwhelming joy. "I love you too, Thomas." "More than I thought possible." His face lit with happiness. "Does that mean yes?" "It means," she said, stepping closer, "that I'd be honored to build a future with you, to make a home together, to love each other for all our days." Thomas gathered her in his arms, his kiss tender yet passionate. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you this, Prudence Dawson, soon to be Prudence Crawford. If you'll take my name, I will cherish you, respect you, and stand beside you through whatever life brings. Not as your protector or your owner, but as your partner." "And I promise you the same," she whispered, "equal in all things." They sealed their promise with another kiss as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in colors of hope and renewal. 6 months later, Prudence stood in the doorway of their new cabin, watching as Thomas worked with the cattle in the spring sunshine. The ranch was coming back to life, the cabin rebuilt larger and sturdier than before, the herd growing with new calves. Inside, a cradle waited in the corner of their bedroom, prepared for the child that would arrive by summer's end. Prudence placed a hand on her gently rounded belly, marveling at the journey that had brought her here, from prisoner to survivor. From survivor to wife, a true wife, cherished and respected, soon to be mother. Each role chosen freely, embraced with joy, Thomas looked up, catching sight of her in the doorway. His face broke into a warm smile that still made her heart flutter. He waved and she waved back, a simple gesture that contained worlds of meaning between them. She thought back to that desperate night of escape, running barefoot across the prairie, certain she would die but preferring death to continued captivity. How could she have known then that freedom would lead not just to safety but to love? To happiness so complete it sometimes overwhelmed her. Thomas was walking toward her now, his stride purposeful. When he reached the porch, he swept her into a gentle embrace, mindful of her condition. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Prudence smiled up at him. About how far I've come, about how escaping a life I couldn't endure led me to you, to this. Understanding softened his features. He placed a hand over hers on her belly, where their child grew strong. You escaped, he agreed, but you also built something new, we both did. As the spring breeze carried the scent of wildflowers across their land, Prudence leaned into her husband's embrace, secure in the knowledge that their story begun in desperation but continuing in joy would only grow richer with each passing season. She had escaped. She had survived. But most importantly, she had found the courage to love again, to trust again. And in doing so, she had built not just a new life, but a legacy of strength that would endure long after the memories of her darkest days had faded.